Well, welcome to another Awana's at Home, guys. I hope that you are enjoying it as you get ready for Thanksgiving and you have a nice or big or gigantic turkey ahead of you. I know my wife and I already have ours, and it is about a 24-pounder. So our little kid, Luke, tried to lift it up and he almost dropped it on his foot. It was so heavy. So be careful with those gigantic heavy turkeys. Now, what we're going to be working on today is we should be in section 2.4, and it's entitled The Bible Teaches Us About History. Now, before we jump into that, I'm going to share something with you guys. And it is actually one of my favorite people in the whole entire history of the world. Now, we'll talk about some others that you're more familiar with, but this guy is called Alexander the Great. And what I like about him was he was this guy. He honestly really wasn't anything super spectacular or anything, but you could kind of tell just by looking at the picture he was a warrior. And what he ended up doing was he ended up dying before he even reached the age of 35. But in that time, he expanded his kingdom. He was from Greece, and he expanded that Greek kingdom much more rapidly than was ever thought possible. So I'm going to share with you how big his empire was. So all of this color that's not yellow, that's how big his empire was. And remember, he died before he was 35 years old, and he obviously didn't go out as a little commander and start conquering when he was 8. So he accomplished all this in less than 15 years. He started over in Greece, and he went all the way to India. He went down to Egypt. And that's just an amazing feat. Here's this guy who didn't have cell phones, didn't have a car, didn't have airplanes, and yet he was able to not only travel this far in his life, but he was also able to kind of take over these cities. Some cities were so feared by him was that they would even surrender and he wouldn't have to do a battle with them. Now, kind of the crazy part is when he got over to India, he said, you know what, that's it, I've had enough, and I'm going to try to head back home. But he ended up dying before he made it back home. Now, the reason why I like that so much is it kind of reminds me of Christianity. Now, Christianity, as you know, is someone who believes in Jesus, that he's God's only son, that he came down from heaven and died on the cross for us. But what's great about this is Christianity wasn't like Alexander the Great and said, you know what, at some point, I'm just done, or I don't need to tell more people about it. This is a map of Christianity. So let me zoom down. Christianity started right about here in Israel and Judah, and it spread. And it spread throughout all of Egypt, Turkey, Greece, Spain, Rome, Europe. And that was just in like the first 300 years. And what was great about it, unlike Alexander the Great, was Alexander had to use force to spread it, but Christianity just uses God's love and his desire to be connected with us. And if we look at our map today, Christianity has spread throughout the entire world, which is much further than Alexander the Great did with this. This is quite a feat, but Christianity did that exact same thing. And guess what? When Paul and Peter and even Jesus were out telling about the good news about who Jesus was or who he himself was, they didn't have those cell phones, and yet they still made these trips and they still influenced millions of people. Now, I want you guys to remember that the Bible teaches us about history. They're not just stories that we read, but it's actual events, actual people. Now, many people in the Bible were told to do ridiculous things. If I told you to do it, I honestly hope you'd say, no way, I'm not doing that, Mr. Wimbley. But because God told them to do that, they jumped right in and they say, you know what? Because God's telling me to do this, I'm going to do it. Now, we have our memory verse. It's Romans 15:4. So I'm going to share that with you guys. Oops, and I have them a little out of order. And what Romans 15:4 tells us is this. It says, for whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through the encouragement of the scriptures we might have hope. So they're telling us the Bible was written to give us hope, to help us endure. Now, there's many people in the Bible that we're going to be talking about that were kind of given this hopeless situation, and yet God use them and show them, hey, I'm going to take care of you. And not only that, but he had it recorded so we can learn from their actions and also see that, hey, God's going to take care of me. Now, we have my favorite book in the whole Bible is Hebrews. We're not 100% sure who the writer is, but we're pretty sure we think it might have been Paul, just based on the structure of the language of it. Now, in Hebrews, there is this chapter, it's chapter 11, and it's called the Hall of Faith. And what we have in the Hall of Faith is we have a whole bunch of people that this writer said, hey, these guys trusted God and they endured. Even when things were hard, they put their faith in him because they knew God's word is always true. And they said, God's going to take care of me because he made that promise. Now, when we study the Bible, we study those stories, we study those people, and we should get that feeling that, hey, just like God protected them 1,000 years ago, he's going to protect and watch over us. It should give us that sense of hope, that sense of encouragement. So I'm going to share my screen with you again, and we're going to head back to this one, which was, I just put it out of order. And it says, studying the Bible, studying the people in the Bible can strengthen our faith. They're not just stories, remember. They're actual events that have happened. And if God watched over these people, he's going to watch over us. So we're going to head to Hebrews chapter 11, and we're going to look at some verses between 7 and 28. And I'm going to read them for you, and I want you to think, what did these people have faith in? What do they believe that God is going to do for them? So verse 7 says this, by faith Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for salvation of his household, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to his faith. Now here's the guy Noah building a boat out in the middle of the desert. People are ridiculing him, the Bible tells us. It really hasn't rained, it hasn't flooded, and yet he has this monstrous thing. And he didn't give up, but he persevered, he endured. It took him years and years and years and years, decades in fact, to make this boat. But he still did it because he had faith that when God made that promise to him that it was going to flood, that he was going to be prepared for it. Now, there's an even more unique one because it might be something that's a little easier for us to relate in this Hall of Faith. And it's from verse 8. It's someone we probably all know. It's Abraham. So listen to verse 8. And while I do, I want you to tell me, how did Abraham show his faith? It says, by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. Here's God telling this guy, Abraham, take everything and move. God didn't tell him where he was going. He just said, there's going to be a promised land. And I'm going to make your descendants more numerous than the stars. And Abraham just said, hey, I'm going to follow this person that's telling me all these things. Now, that might be similar to what we have a lot, especially when we think of missionaries. You can be a missionary. God might be telling you to go do something, and it might be far away or even might be close. And you might say, you know what, God? I don't know if that's the best idea. But we need to be just like Abraham. We need to pick everything up and head on out because God is in control. God's the one that's watching over us. And if he's in charge, nothing else really matters. So we can study how Abraham reacted to God and be like, hey, that's what I want to be like. Now, there's other people in there. There's a person I'm sure you've also heard called Moses that talks about in verses 24 to 27. And here's this man again. God said, I'm going to use you to free all of the slaves, all of the Israelites in Egypt. And Moses said, after some talking with God, said, all right, I'll do it. And he brought his brother Aaron, and they delivered all these people. He didn't say, God, the Egyptian army is the most powerful on earth. There's no way we can do it. He said, you know what? I will do it. I just need my brother Aaron to help me speak. So I want you guys to remember as we go along in our book, remember that the Bible isn't just stories, but they're real events that happened. And we can study it and realize that, hey, faith means trusting in God's word, even if our circumstances are hard. Even if we're like Abraham and say, I don't know anyone in this new place. Those are hard circumstances, but we're still going to trust God that he has our best interests out for us.